Welcome, everyone. Tim Derling here with Tim's Vinyl Confessions, and I've got a very special guest coming back from my rock and roll heaven, Mr. Chris Preston. Hello, sir.
Good morning, Tim. Great to be back. Always excited to chat music and especially Def Leppard with you. So excited about this one.
Yeah, we haven't done a Def Leppard episode in a while, and I figured there's nobody better to talk to than Chris. I mean, like I said, I'm a big fan, have been for years. I know lots of fans, but Chris might, I don't know, he's just got that edge over.
Yeah,
And
definitely up there.
Yeah, we're here to talk about something, a couple of things, but one thing that hasn't been out very long, and it's actually Chris's background, which is really cool. It's this new release from, well, relatively new release from Def Leppard. It is live at the Leadmill, May 19th, 2023. This is a single disc live album. Leadmill, of course, is in the band's hometown of Sheffield. So we're going to talk about that album. We're going to also talk about something that's been out much longer, and I'm very late, very late in getting, but I figure it's never too late to talk about it. So
No,
I wanted to pick Chris's, mega fan brain a little bit about that, see what he got out of, what we're about to talk about. So,
absolutely.
so we'll start with the live album, Chris. And I mean, like a lot of classic bands, at a certain point, the studio albums start to become overtaken in terms of number by compilations and live
Yes.
albums. Def Leppard have had a lot live albums in even just in the last 10 years or so. So for the casual fan, what would you say makes this release different and worth picking up as opposed to any of the previous ones, There Will
Right.
Be Next Time and all of those?
Well, so there's a couple things for me. So as a fan who's, I've seen this band many, many times, right? And like you said, there's lots of live stuff out there. This one, to me, for someone who, might be a casual fan, like you said, is a must-have simply for the fact that you're getting a live set list that doesn't have the typical, shall we say, when you see them in concert, the hits. Yes, there are the hits on here, but there are a number of songs that they haven't played in many years and a couple that, have gone in and out of the set list, but definitely aren't mainstays. So for people that haven't heard some of these Def Leppard songs live before, this is a great piece to have. Also, the fact that you're getting this recording in a small venue, right? Like that makes such a big difference. There's so many live albums out there, and stadiums and arenas are not necessarily the best in terms of acoustics and sound quality. So the fact you're getting them in an intimate, like I think it was 900 fans in this small venue in Sheffield, it sounds different to me. Like, and we'll talk about it more, but the quality of recording on this is top notch, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Like, the when you're in a big stadium, an arena, there's an excitement and
Yes.
you get wrapped up in it as a fan. But in terms of audio recording, it's not, for audio engineers and people that are trying to capture a usable performance. It's not those big arenas, and especially like the outdoor shows, they're not known for their fidelity. They're not
No,
known
they're
for
not.
their, crystal clear sound. So yes, it's much easier to capture a really good sound, practically live off the floor in a
Exactly.
smaller venue. Now, Chris, was this a fan club thing? How did people get to this gig? Was it a secret gig? How did that go?
Yeah, it was all tied into the release of, they were very busy in early 2023, right? With the Diamond Star Halos album out and kind of the surprise as well of Drastic Symphonies, which we didn't really know was coming. It was like, oh my God, we get this Def Leppard album that's new. And so this was announced as kind of tied into them, their hometown kind of vibe. The fact that this venue, the Lead Mill, which has been around for years and years and years, is also struggling in terms of paying the bills. So this was done as well in support of a trust for music venues that would fund keeping these things alive, which they're obviously very big about. But there were limited tickets released to to the general public, but obviously very hard to get. I actually had a few friends who were at this show who got tickets. A few friends that you might know, Neil from Def Leppard Pod.
Name sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a Def Leppard podcast. He was there. So there's a few of the diehard fans that I connect with regularly that got to see this show that are in the audience, which is amazing hearing them talk about it. So yeah, the tickets were extremely limited, were gone instantly, obviously. And this kind of tied into they had a whole week long kind of promo when Diamond Star Halos came out, and it was all tied into this. We're going to do an intimate show in our hometown. And then obviously they kicked off the tour after that.
Yeah. Very cool. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, when I look at this quick, it's got Pour Some Sugar on Me. It's got Hysteria. It's got Bringing on the Heartbreak. But you take another look at it and you start thinking,
Yeah.
there's no Photograph, no
Yeah.
Freedom, no Rock of Ages, no Animal, no Love Bites, no Armageddon, no Let's Get Rocked. I mean, but what they do have on here, I mean, so there are two songs from the most recent studio album, Diamond Star Halos.
Yep.
You've got Fire It Up and Kick. Now, those aren't the two songs I would have picked for the set list, but hey, I'm not in the band. They do Slang, which always sounds really cool live.
Oh, it's so good live.
Yeah. I love that they open with Action. I love that. I mean, it's a sweet cover, but it's also on Retroactive.
Great opener.
Always seemed tailor-made for them. Like,
to me, that's a Def Leppard song.
you really hear the influence. And I've heard the Sweet Original, and they're very faithful to it. So
yeah.
Obviously a huge influence on the band, because if they can do a song and it sounds like them and they didn't do that much to it, wow. I mean, that's saying a lot. And a song that they did the last time I saw Def Leppard in concert was in 2019 with Tesla, which was fantastic. Yes. And they did a song then that they're still doing now, or like you said, pulled back into the set, and that's Excitable. Mm-hmm. Which is, if you could call it a deeper cut from Hysteria, I guess that's it.
Yes.
And I like how Joe has adapted his voice to not only do the songs in their original keys, which makes a huge difference, but preserve his voice.
Yeah.
And it's always been a strength of the band that they've got strong singers in the band. They've got three other strong voices. Well, really four, but in live, they've got three other voices that can take the high notes. So you're not really missing that effect.
It's such a huge impact on the overall vocals, like you said, because they can kind of back Joe up and, help him out when he can't hit those high notes. Like Phil and Viv, holy smokes. Yeah. Like Viv is in this band. Like, he's a guitar wizard. And he doesn't get to flex those muscles a lot with Leppard, but he's in here because, and he said in the past, like, this is a challenge vocally for me to be in this band.
Yeah.
And he's a great singer, and they hit those high notes. And it's evident when you listen to this and watch the DVD.
You can hear what the different guys bring to the background vocals. Phil, I've always thought, sounds an awful lot like Joe.
Yes.
Like he can do a convincing Joe. So, that's an asset to have. Rick Savage, Rick kind of fills the Brian May role in this band with the mid-range lower stuff. Yeah, not unlike how Eddie Van Halen did it live. It wasn't that stuff, but it was that mid stuff to give it some weight in the background vocals there. And as a huge fan of the High and Dry album, that album's for a short, for one single disc, that album's well represented on here.
Oh, absolutely.
They usually do, Heartbreak and 625, which is always welcome. But they do Let It Go. And they do Mirror, Mirror. Like that was really cool. And I love that they close with Wasted. Like, that kind of takes it all back. That's one of their oldest songs. It was, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was one of the only songs solely penned by the late Steve Clark.
Yes.
So I think that was on purpose. I think that meant a lot. And absolutely. It's a good performance. I mean, it's a good performance, and I like this in the same way that I like the charmingly titled Dead Flatbird set on Viva
absolutely.
Where they essentially opened for themselves in Vegas, and they did deeper cuts. They did Good Morning Freedom. They do these songs that you'd never expect to hear. So this is fantastic. I mean, this is a worthy addition to the collection. Yes, Yeah, they have a lot of live albums, but if you're a fan, you're going to enjoy this one. The band sounds great, and it is almost like, they invited 900 fans into a studio and just
Yeah.
jammed out a live set, because it's got that high fidelity recording, but it's a live show. You can feel the energy, and it makes you, why wasn't I there? Like it just, you get the fly on the wall thing. I mean, and I only have the CD, but of course it's also on Blu-ray.
Yeah, this is the Blu-ray
Yeah.
here.
And what can you tell us about seeing this performance?
Yeah, so this I picked up the Blu-ray and CD pack, digipack. Just to comment quickly, I might not be able to see it properly with my. Okay, there we go. There's only high level. This is a fantastic package, like we've talked about. I have only two complaints. I would have preferred a little bit more of a involved in a better packaging of especially the combo pack. Like they've been very good. Joe is the curator of all this, and their releases of special editions, etc., are always top notch. But I was like, this came and I was like, oh, I'm a little bit kind of disappointed. It's not a more substantial. And then the only other complaint is it's too short, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah,
66 minutes, I think. And there's some omissions that really stand out. Like photographs, the big one to me that stands out is like, wow, they didn't play photograph.
yeah,
But that being said, like the track listing, like you mentioned, is killer. The DVD or the Blu-ray, I watched it again a couple nights ago. Man, it is a fun show. If you were I almost thought I was gonna go potentially, and then I just like I couldn't make it work. But having the Blu-ray and DVD was a very close second, obviously, in terms of like feeling like I was there because you get again a little bit of a even when you're watching this at home, you get a little bit of a different vibe from the intimate setting, right, than watching one of their big stadium DVDs. So you feel a little bit more like, well, I'm kind of there in a sense. You're in your living room watching it, and it's a small venue. Um, no frills, right? Like Def Leppard is a massive stage show. They have lasers, they have all kinds of video boards. So to see them, I've never seen them like this. The smallest venue I saw them at was on the Slang Tour, which was a 5,000 seater arena. So to see them like this with just, the five of them on stage on a small stage, not a lot of moving around, not a lot of lighting, not a lot of special effects. Rick's behind the drum screen. It's really cool. So it's
yeah,
again, it lends to that like, man, this is awesome to see them in this setting, and the fans are energetic. There's a lot of back and forth with the audience. Hysteria they do the version of Hysteria that has kind of that extended outro with the oh, and they added
yeah,
that a couple
yeah,
years ago, and the crowd really gets into that. But in terms of their like stage performance, like these guys are such pros, right? Like, and it comes obviously their stadium shows, it comes across as these giant events, but even in this little setting, a band like this of their stature, and it's amazing to watch them as the pros that they are in a small venue, in a big venue, in a mid-sized venue, and how Joe works the crowd and the interplay with the audience. It's all there, but it's in a 900 seat venue. So there's a real different vibe to it that I really like. And then to your point about how the band sounds, right? So the CD obviously is a recording of the live show, and the Blu-ray the same thing. But this is probably the best I have heard them on a live recording, I think, in terms of overall quality, right? And to your point of Joe taking care of his voice, he had some troubles a few years ago, right? The Hysteria on the High Seas fiasco.
yeah.
Man, did he do what he needed to do to take care of his voice as a coach, voice coach, got the medical advice. He has limits to the high end, but you don't hear it because of the other guys, like we talked
Yeah.
about,
You
and
don't miss it.
you don't miss
As a
it.
diehard fan, it's coming, but I
Right.
think I think in terms of, say a song like Too Late for Love, he sings it differently.
Yes.
I don't think you're expecting those shredding high notes
No,
anymore, but
I
it
don't.
still sounds full and good, and you don't feel like you're being ripped off.
Exactly. And the great thing about this recording and the quality of the sound and Joe's voice, I think on this, of the 13 songs on here, I think the best performances by him are actually the old songs, which are extremely hard to sing. You
Yeah.
listen to High and Dry and Pyromania, and he is like, he got pushed by Mutt to the
You
maximum.
got it. Yeah. He was 19, 20 years old
Right.
when those were made. And, here we are in 2024, well, 2023 when this was recorded. And, you raise a good point. I mean, it's happening. It's happening with our veteran singers. Look at Steven Tyler. I mean, sometimes you can't get that voice back.
No.
And or sometimes you don't have it, but you keep going anyway, which
Well, we won't discuss
we won't
that.
discuss that. But yeah. Now, does the video have any songs that aren't on the CD?
No, no.
Okay,
It's the
because
exact
sometimes
same.
that happens. Either there's an extra song on the CD or there's an extra song,
Yeah,
on the
you're
video.
right.
But
You're right.
and it almost kind of makes me think of when they were doing those warm-up shows in was Ballybunion,
Yes.
in Ireland before Hysteria was released when they had Jeff Rich.
Yes.
Makes me think of a place about that size. Now maybe that was even smaller, but you look on the stage and yeah, there's not a lot of room to move, and they're used to having Rick with his drums.
Yeah.
Four guys just go out like that and work the crowd. They've always been that way, but this, to see what they can do in an intimate setting, you don't need that big crowd.
Yeah. And that's what I really
Joe can work a crowd of 900 as easily
doesn't
as
matter.
one of 15,000 or more.
And you can really get from especially from the Blu-ray DVD, is you really get the sense it does come across from them that they are like pumped to be there. Like this is a
Yeah.
big deal, right?
Yeah.
Like this is hometown, a small venue that they, want to see keep going with all the struggles that small venues have had after COVID. It comes across like you can see
Yeah.
the sincerity, and like I said, to me, the best songs on this album are the High and Dry, On Through the Night. He sounds amazing on those, and those Mirror Mirror, Wasted, and Let It Go probably you can really get on the DVD Blu-ray the crowd's excitement to hear those.
Yeah.
Because they don't play those, right? They haven't played anything from On Through the Night since probably the Dead Flatbird
Yeah.
set.
Yeah.
So you can feel the energy and the excitement of the crowd when those songs come on. Like Wasted you can hear it on the CD too.
That's such a
my God.
killer riff. I mean, it's so good. Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's funny, yeah, that's for Joe and the Ricks, that's home. That's their hometown. And so 3/5 of the band, they're home. It's funny, like just outside of Fredericton, which is just an hour away from me, there's a little place called Sheffield, and I never go past that road sign without thinking of Def Leppard. That's just
oh yeah,
it's
absolutely.
synonymous, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's Joe Cocker and Paul Carrick fans are like, well, they're not the only musicians from Sheffield, but
I think Human
yeah.
League is too.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yes, and we're going to get to that's live at the Leadmill, folks. I think you'll like it. If you've watched this far, I think you'll like it. It's available on multiple formats. Now that seems to be a record store day. I see a record store day sticker.
Sorry, it's my background's not
it's
helping.
the bane of having a cool background. They still haven't perfected it yet when you come in and out of the shot. But
so I bought the two. I have two copies, Record Store Day, and then they did release it just recently on orange vinyl. So I've got both of those, as well as the DVD and the Blu-ray. But must have, if you're a Def Leppard fan, you got to pick this up. To have, like you said, Tim, to have slang on here too,
yeah,
is a nice treat because it's so fun live. That song,
yeah, yeah,
so pick this thing up.
The Slang album was an album that I struggled with. I think we've talked about that, but I did see the Slang tour, as you said, smaller venue, not very well attended, but man, did the band sound good. And the songs they played from Slang, I really enjoyed. And even when I saw them on the Euphoria tour, they still did Slang. Yeah. So that tells me that they believe in that song. And to be quite honest, it was probably the most Def Leppard sounding song on that album, and it's probably one of the few songs in that album that had any sense of fun to it, because that was
very dark.
album. It was a dark time for the band, so it came out in the album. I appreciate it more now, but there's still
Me
some
too.
things on it where I go, man, oh, that's a downer.
It
And I
is
don't go to this
depressing.
band for downers. You know, they've often said it's escapism, right? It's
Totally.
to make you forget your problems, not to remind you of them. So
Absolutely.
uh, that's the new one. And now I'm going to talk about the thing that I should have bought way earlier, but I finally just got around to. Uh,
Glad you finally got it.
yeah, it was always in the back of my mind. I've eventually got to get this, and I'm talking about definitely the official story of Def Leppard. And by the band, for the fans. This really cool, like, what would you call this?
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
really cool binding that they have just around this part, the black part. It reminds me of a textbook almost.
yeah, yeah.
And this is a textbook. I mean, this you could teach a
It
course on
really
Def
is.
Leppard, and this would be, you know, the only difference is there's not questions at the end of each chapter. But
Yeah, exactly.
uh, I like this. I like the fact that the logo's embossed here, and as is this section here.
Yep.
So, man, um, I mean, I knew this, right? Because they do good. They put out quality product, right?
They really do.
The photos through the years are astounding.
Oh,
Um, I don't want to give away too many spoilers because, like I said, as a Def Leppard fan, you will enjoy reading this. Now, did I learn a lot from the book? Not a lot, because I've been a fan since '88. But
exactly.
I did learn a few things. There were a few little things that I did not know about the band, including what almost became this album here, Retroactive. I won't spoil that, but if you're into
No, crazy.
a little thrashier side of things, then there's a connection in the designer.
Yes,
Um,
you're exactly right.
a designer I've been enough to work with, as a matter of fact, but that's another
A
story.
legend, a legend.
Legend, yeah. But and yeah, right, it's little things, right? Well, I don't think it's little things, but this page right here
Yep.
immediately made me think of Historia.
Yes.
Blue,
Same color. Yep.
yeah. And I think that's on purpose. I think that they work very hard to, put these things together that will appeal to fans. There's two forwards, both by folks that have been involved in Def Leppard's career for many years. First is Brian May, of course. I mean, and an influence on all the guys. Queen was an influence on the entire band.
And dear friends of theirs.
They're good
Yes.
friends with Brian, and Brian inducted them in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I really, oddly enough, as we're filming this right now, it's November 24th, which was the anniversary of Freddie Mercury's death. But as Brian says, Joe was one of the first people to call
Yes.
him, and Brian was one of the first people to call Joe when Steve Clark died, same year.
Yep.
Bookended.
Crazy.
The year was bookended. I have to mention Eric Carr too, because
Of
Eric
course.
tends to get forgotten because Freddie was
Yes.
such a worldwide star on his own. But yeah, and also by David, is it Frick or Fricky?
Frick.
Frick.
Yeah.
David Frick from Rolling Stone, who goes back way back with the band, I think, to the Pyromania era. He also wrote, I guess it was their biography as of 1987, Animal Instinct.
Another great book.
Yeah. So there's so much to talk about here. For a fan like me that loves collecting formats, I loved seeing the CD long boxes.
Yes.
I noticed that right away. I'm like, oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, I've got two of them here myself.
Yeah, I only ever had Adrenalize when I did. I don't have my long boxes anymore. But the only Def Leppard one I ever had was Adrenalize, because when I bought, I think it was On Through the Night. It wasn't in a long box; it was in a blister pack.
Hmm. Hated those things.
So once you opened them, there was nothing to keep, right?
Exactly. Exactly. This
So it's pretty in depth. It's I don't know what would you say the ratio of pictures to text would be in this?
oh my God. It's it's definitely like a 3 to 1 at least ratio of photos to text. But these so there's a I echo everything you said, Tim. Like for a Def Leppard fan, if you're a Def Leppard fan, you have to have this. Number one. It is a coffee table book in my house.
Yes.
Down because it's right there because I pick it up and constantly just like look through it,
Yeah.
right? It's one of those kinds of books. Even if you're not a Def Leppard super fan and you're a music fan, this is a great purchase just in terms of, giving, if you're a fan of music and rock, they're one of obviously the biggest bands in rock music that
Yeah,
captures, a number of different age groups. I go to concerts now and you've got little kids there that their parents have taken them in three generations. So they cover that much ground in terms of their fan base that, as a music fan, to have a history like this in one very nice package
yeah,
and that's so important is really great. And Ross Halfin, who's been with them for years and
legendary photographer.
right, like this is such a great kind of not snapshot, but it's a work of his art in
Yep.
one nice setting that I just love flipping through this and looking at the different pictures. There are so many
Like
things.
here's a little example. This is
Yeah,
some sketches from what would become the Let's Get Rocked video, the little character.
right?
And I'd forgotten. I'd read about this back in the day, but it was very much inspired by Bart Simpson.
Yes, it was.
Um,
And they needed, remember too, they needed something. That album was heavy, right? They lost Steve.
yeah,
They needed something that was a dark time. They've done White Lightning, and they were like, we need to write something that's like just fun. Hey, it's us to get out of that funk, and that's where
yeah.
Let's Get Rock came from. But this book, Joe, again as the curator, is so meticulous. Like you said, like this is quality, right? Like from the binding to the covers to the fonts to the embossed to the photos. Probably for me, like you said, I didn't learn a lot having been a fan. I own their other books, but a lot of the photos of some of those things that you mentioned, I had never seen before.
Yeah. And there are a lot of photo shoots that I recognized,
Yeah,
but they're alternate photos that I've never seen before.
exactly.
There's a lot of that in there. There's a lot of like, well, this is what was on the rest of that camera roll. Yeah, it's really. I do have a question about the earlier days of the book. Do you think that the quotes in here from Pete Willis were archival, or do you think they were new? Do you think he actually contributed?
Yeah, I know. I knew you were going to go that where you were going with
Because
that.
he's like the hermit of classic rock, right?
Yeah, I have a feeling they're archival. Now, I do know that um, there's no bad blood there, I don't think.
No, I
Like
don't think so.
in terms of like what happened, even Pete has said in prior interviews that, I probably would have died had I not like he was a severe alcoholic, had problems, but he was invited to come to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame
Yeah,
induction. He was like they don't shy away from that era in terms of talking about Pete and his influence. But it seems like it's maybe one of those situations where he's made the complete clean break, right? Like that's it.
maybe a little bit like John Deacon from
Yeah,
Queen.
exactly.
You'd never hear. And
No.
and another guy, that I used to wonder about. Uh, I know this is not a band favorite of yours, but John Rutsey, the original Rush drummer, I
Yeah.
always wondered whatever became of him. And then I
Good
found out
point.
he died, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Well, I guess there won't be any, coming up on stage for the final tour kind of thing.
No.
But with Pete Willis, and Pete Willis is, I mean, Pete was the metal guy in
Yes,
Def Leppard.
correct.
That's why those first two albums are so heavy. And his writing's all over Pyromania too. Very, very talented guitar player, very good writer. But the funny thing is when I see those old videos of Def Leppard, Pete looks so tiny
He
with that
is.
Explorer guitar. Like he looks like he was just a little guy, but man, could he play!
He,
It's a
he had
shame that he didn't. I know that I think he had a band called Roadhouse,
he did have a band after,
and
yes.
but he never was able to capitalize on. I mean, I know he needed to get himself sorted out. Obviously, it's such a shame. I always thought it was such a shame that they recognized that with Pete, and yet Steve Clark never was able to pull himself out of it.
Yeah, it's sad. Like to your point, the fact he wasn't able to do anything, like you would have thought that, hey, as an ex-member of Def Leppard, you see a lot of guys who are out of bands go on to start another one or do their own thing, and they've got the name recognition, right? And
Yeah,
that helps and pushes their new venture forward. But yeah, Pete just,
Yeah, didn't
for
quite.
whatever reason,
And
didn't quite.
and the thing is, it's not like, to use a Beatles comparison, it's not like Pete Best. Pete was on all three of those first three albums,
Yep,
and all of those albums went platinum to some extent, right?
exactly.
So it's not as if he was in the band. It's not like what Tony Kenning or Frank Noon. It's not like those guys.
Right.
But yeah, it's kind of a shame. But I'm glad they do recognize. There's no stone left unturned here.
Oh.
There's lots of. You mentioned the vocals earlier when we were talking about the live album, and Vivian talks a lot about how David Coverdale was very supportive of him singing.
Yes,
And
yes.
his vocal coach eventually became Joe's vocal coach. And I don't know that I knew that. Another thing that I didn't know, oddly enough, there's a Whitesnake connection here. I knew John Sykes had been in the running
He
to replace
definitely
Steve
was.
Clark, but
Yes.
I did not know about. And when I read it, I'm like, that sounds about
Adrian
right
Smith.
from what I know about John Sykes. I'm a huge fan. I love that first Blue Murder album to death. That would not have worked.
I don't think so either. Right? It
You
was
wouldn't
I.
have had you wouldn't have had the band as it existed in 1992 be the same five guys today if John Sykes had been the replacement.
Agreed.
Would not have lasted.
Yeah, it would have been interesting, but wouldn't have lasted. I don't think Adrian Smith, who was another possibility, would have lasted. And then there was another young no-name guy.
Okay, that's something I learned. I won't name the name.
Yeah, I won't go there either.
I had no idea. I've never seen the name before in my life. Also,
Yeah,
never seen the spelling before in my life.
right.
Adrian Smith would have worked better than John Sykes because they're about the same age. They came up in the same kind of. Well, I guess John Sykes kind of did too, to an extent. But anybody that's heard Adrian Smith's The ASAP album knows that Adrian Smith could write in a more commercial vein.
Well, and like Wasted Years, right? Like that's a great example.
Exactly. Or Reach Out, that song.
Yep,
That's not 100 miles away from a Def Leppard song.
exactly.
But what would have happened when Bruce went back to Maiden? So it's interesting the what could have been or what might have been. But Vivian, when they announced Vivian, I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. Is it going to fit? But it has. He settled in, and well, he's the only. That's the only lineup I've ever seen a Def Leppard in concert.
Me
So,
too. Me
you
too.
know,
And the other thing that works great with Vivian, right, in terms of like the whole reason that Vivian was selected was, well, not the whole reason. A big part of it was the fact he was a great singer.
yeah,
Number two, they already knew him quite well. Like
yeah,
they knew he would fit in as their brotherhood into
yeah,
the band, right?
yeah.
So I think it was more of that case is what they were looking for. And now he's been there, what, 32 years?
And he came from the same background too, because of Sweet Savage. He was part of the new wave of British heavy metal.
Exactly.
And Joe, when Joe moved to Dublin, that probably helped. And yeah, no, it's interesting. All of these twists and turns. And I got to say, Def Leppard are one of the very, very few bands that have not had a ton of lineup changes. It's been very solid. If there's been drama, they've kept it hidden well. Like,
You really have, if there is.
if there has been, I know there's been issues. There's been issues with dwindling sales, dwindling popularity.
Sure. Yep.
But they persevered and they got to the point where, like you said, now there's entire families coming to Def Leppard shows. And the same can be said for a lot of classic rock bands. They had to go through the 90s. They had to go through that in the Deer period where it was just, and that's another interesting aspect in the book. We're talking about changing management and how that
breathed new life into them.
they weren't doing state fairs anymore, that sort of thing. And yeah, it's a great read. And honestly, it's still up to date for the most part. You're not missing.
Oh, completely. Yeah.
Yeah. But
It's one that too, if you're, like you said, I have it on my coffee table. I flip through it occasionally if I'm just sitting in the living room, but reading the little tidbits of things like that we already know, but little tidbits of stuff that, really takes you in behind the scenes of different things. Like the fact that, Coverdale, they were recording at the same time, right? And I forget what album it was. Was it Pyromania or Hysteria? One of the two anyways, but he really helped Joe, right? In terms of Mutt was pushing him, and There's a good
Yeah,
story.
I'm if I'm not mistaken, I think we're talking about Pyromania.
Yeah.
So in the case of Whitesnake, I think we're talking about Saints and Sinners. So we're back in '82, and I think it's
Yes.
Battery Studios is
That's
where,
it
because
exactly.
both of those albums are they're listed as being recorded there. And I didn't know this. There's another little part where they've got old lists of like facts about each member. They
Yes.
filled them in
Yep.
themselves. And Joe had listed David Coverdale as one of his favorite singers. I've never heard him say that before.
I've never heard that either. No.
So, and another thing, I'm going to reference Chris's favorite band again, but Steve Clark, I would not have put Alex Lifeson on the list of Steve Clark's favorite guitar players.
That's a shocker to
I
me.
did not know that. I didn't know that.
I thought he was always like a Jimmy Page guy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The
I
Zeppelin,
knew that Steve's audition was the Freebird solo. I knew that. But it's just cool to have all this stuff in one place too. To
exactly.
one, and you will, if you pick it up, like Chris said, as a coffee table book. You don't necessarily have to pick it up from the beginning. You could just flip to a page. Oh, that's a cool picture, and then you start reading what's along the side. And you're like, oh, how about that? It went into a lot more detail about that Irish tour that I hesitate to call it a tour, but those warm-up gigs with Jeff Rich sitting in on drums before Rick got to his full. There was a lot more detail about all the other cities that they played. Because I think really the only one I knew was Ballybunion, because it's got such a strange name, so that sticks. And it's mentioned in the Hysteria liner notes and all of that. Goes into a lot of detail about that.
Well, and that's such a cool period of the band, right? Because they're gearing up to get Rick back out there in front of a live audience. And they talk about it in the other books as well, but this one where it goes into detail and they talk about, that especially that show, the Donington show, which was kind of like where it poured rain and that was the coming out party with Rick back. Jeff Rich didn't make it and he was on his own. And, Joe's talked about it and I get the goosebumps from when he talks about like the crowd. It felt like a wall of when they and
it
Rick
felt like wind or something
because Joe wasn't going to mention it. Joe wasn't going to talk about it, and then he said that I could feel it. I had to say like Rick Allen, everyone, and it was just like wow.
I think as fans, that's been such part of the story for so long, but it's easy to take for granted how remarkable that is because for a lot of reasons, it's remarkable that Rick had perseverance to do it, to keep going. And I think any other band, no matter how good friends they were, would have said, well,
yeah, what are we going to do?
We got to keep going.
Right.
We need a new drummer and we'll take good care of you financially, but we got to keep going. But they didn't. And I mean, the good thing about that is like you don't hear about that type of thing happening too many times as far as drummers losing a limb.
Of course.
But and that led into, and Vivian references that because Vivian had his cancer scare and he talks about if Rick can do this, so he'd become such an inspirational figure for people of all walks of life.
Absolutely.
What I'm saying is it's all in this book.
It's all in this book.
All in definitely
pick it up. Def
Leppard. So there you go. Always great to talk Def Leppard with Chris Preston, My Rock and Roll Heaven. Please follow him on all socials. He's got great content. And Chris will no doubt be back again. Chances are, even if it's not about Def Leppard, inevitably we end up talking about them. So
absolutely happy to be here. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Chris. Thanks everybody for watching this edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions. We'll see you.